I hope you're all wearing your name tags. No? It's important to know your name. And I don't know, as I get older, I get forgetful. So I find these really helpful. I'm glad that we have them here at Glennon Heights. Well, let's start by talking about Naaman, which I just realized as I heard the scripture being read that Naaman sort of sounds like name. I don't know if this really was the guy's name or just name. But anyway, in this story, we don't get a lot of names. We only get 2 names in this story. We get Naaman and we get Elisha, the prophet. The other names we do not know. We don't know the name of the wife. We don't know the name of the servant girl, the slave girl, and we don't know the names of the kings. But this little girl, this little slave girl, who might have been anywhere from, say, 8 to 18, is an immigrant, although an unwilling one. She's really a slave. It was not her choice to be in Naaman's household. But she's serving Naaman's wife, and she knows that Naaman has a skin disease. At that time, they called it leprosy, and it may have been one of any number of skin diseases. And this little unnamed girl cared enough about her master to direct him to someone who could treat his disease. The most dreaded disease that we know of in the biblical world was able to be treated, believe this little girl, by the prophet Elisha, who lived in Samaria. And so this little girl says to Naaman's wife, hey, it's too bad that your husband doesn't know about this prophet. And the wife tells her husband, and he goes to the king and takes lots of money and clothing and stuff to visit the prophet. I'm baffled as to why Naaman believed this little girl and took all of these valuables to Samaria to be healed. Why would he believe this unnamed slave girl in his household? But I've been thinking about the importance of names since Ryan's sermon 2 weeks ago. He was talking about Legion, the man who had been chained in the tombs for so many years and was cast off by the town, was living among the tombs, was often chained, and was so abused that he no longer even knew his name. The first thing that Jesus asked him is, what is your name? Not, what's wrong with you? Why are you out here in the tombs? How come you're chained up? Why don't people like you? No. The first thing Jesus asks is, what is your name? And of course, he doesn't really have an answer. He says Legion, because he's so full of demons, that's all he can see about himself. But Ryan made the point that by asking the man his name, Jesus was humanizing this man. He was making him a person again. You're not just this outcast with a mental illness. You are a person with a name, and I recognize that, is basically what Jesus was saying. And so it made me start to think about the importance of names. And there are several other examples that came to mind. I recently finished listening to a book called The Pecan Man. Now, I would say pecan, but the people reading the book were using Southern accents, and the writer is from the South, and so a lot of the way that the book was read was in the South. And so this was The Pecan Man. And there's an older, it's really a story about race relations in about the 1970s in a small southern town, although it's got a great plot. Don't think it's just educational. I recommend it. Anyway, so there's an older white woman in the town who notices this man who's obviously homeless. He comes out of the woods on a rickety little bicycle, and he goes somewhere. He's dragging a lawnmower, and he goes somewhere and obviously mows some lawns and comes back, And after about 2 weeks, she calls him over. And she says, are you making your living mowing lawns? And he said, yeah. And she said, well, I could use some help. Well, this is very unusual. He is a black man. He's clearly homeless. He is called the pecan man because he pretty much lives on the pecans that fall from the trees. And he always is gathering them up and has a bag on his bicycle, and they know that that's pretty much the nutrition that he's getting. So as she talks to him, she says, well, what's your name? And he says, well, they call me the pecan man. She says, I know that. What's your name? And he says, Edmund Mills. She says, yeah, but what'd your mama call you? And he says, Eddie. And she says, okay, I'll call you Eddie too. And so now this man is human. Now we care about him. And the story goes on to talk about their relationship and some events that happen in the town and how it all works out. But again, it said to me, wow, names are important. We've seen this recently in our own history. Think of the Black Lives Matter movement. Think of the chants, say her name or say his name, the names of people who were killed, usually with law enforcement involvement, and the black community standing up and saying, wait a minute, these people matter. They matter. Say their names. Not just all black people matter, but Trayvon Martin, you matter. And Eric Garner, you matter. And Sandra Bland, you matter. It personalizes it, doesn't it, when you know their names? And then we have the Vietnam War Memorial, which has an interesting history anyway, but part of the attraction of this memorial is the names of everybody who was killed in Vietnam from the United States. I'm sure not everybody, but in the United States and in our armed forces. And so people make pilgrimages there, and they do rubbings of the names that are important to them, and they leave little souvenirs along the base of the monument. And of all the monuments that could have been chosen, the one that was chosen was the one that listed all the names. Names are important. An important part of being human is having a name. You matter. You get attached when you have a name. And yet, in our day and age, as in Naaman's, there are many nameless people who serve us. Think of the people who change our oil, the people who gather the produce from the fields, the people who work in packing houses so that we can buy hamburger in the grocery store. These people all have names. We don't know them. And now these mostly nameless people are being rounded up, and they're being sent to immigration holding prisons. Where? In cities like Aurora, Colorado, in countries like El Salvador, and now to a hastily built conglomeration of cages known as Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. This is not humane. This is unconscionable. We know from the Bible that migrants are close to the heart of God. Abraham and Sarah were migrants from the land of Ur. Joseph and his brothers, well, Joseph's brothers, fled famine and migrated to Egypt. Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt to protect the life of their son, Jesus. How many immigrants to our country came here for the same reasons? A better life, an escape from a natural disaster, or to protect their children. How many of our own ancestors came here for the very same reasons? There are people who travel to the border or who walk into the desert carrying the names of persons who have died trying to reach the United States. In some places, crosses are planted to mark each body that has been recovered. Sometimes their names are known. Sometimes they're not. A simple service of remembrance may include the reading of names and the saying of presente, which means present in Spanish, to honor the person who died. I don't know about you, but I am exhausted by the constant onslaught of information about new laws and policies that dehumanize immigrants and other marginal groups in our country. I no longer watch the evening news. I can't even listen to NPR. I skim some online resources so that I know what's going on, but I can no longer listen to in-depth reporting about how basic human rights are being stripped away, about how US bombs are killing hungry people in Gaza, about how policies meant to slow climate change are defunded and children are swept away by floods. I feel so helpless. I tell myself I can't do anything anyway, so why torture myself reading about all these atrocities? And yet, sources that I respect tell me otherwise. In publications from the Anabaptist World and from Mennonite Central Committee, I read that my position of privilege cannot allow me to tune out these atrocities. I'm just going to show you a few things that I have highlighted out of Mennonite publications from the last few months. This one I just got last night. It's not highlighted yet. Over and over and over again, I read from Anabaptist writers that I respect that say, we have to take a side. We have to speak up. We have to do something. We can't rest in our positions of privilege and not feel anything for those who are oppressed and for those who are suffering. One writer said, take a break if you need it. Compassion fatigue is real. But don't abandon the work of speaking of those who cannot. I have to overcome my feelings of helplessness and use the tools that I have to alleviate suffering. I can speak truth to power. I can take the side of those who are targeted. I can get politically involved, even, maybe especially, if I'm just one small voice. And I can join my voice to others that I trust. We can speak up. We can disrupt. We can act. We followers of Jesus can and must remind ourselves and our elected leaders that human rights are not negotiable. We can use our privilege to name those who are wrongfully detained. Men like Kilmar Albrego Garcia and Frangel Reyes, who were sent to a prison in El Salvador with no due process, no criminal charges, picked up off the streets and sent. We can speak up for a woman who is afraid to use her name, a woman who is referred to simply as Maria, and she's from a Mennonite congregation in our conference. She is from the congregation in San Antonio. She entered the country legally, and she was picked up and detained for no reason that we know. We can recognize that these are people, that they're human beings, that they are children of God, and we can say, presente. Ryan reminded us that the work of humanization is the work of the church. And I'm going to read from the final paragraph of his notes because they sum up everything that I want to say. The work of humanization is the work of the church, and this is the work that we are all called to. We are called to restore the humanity of one another. And whenever we do the work of humanization, we are doing the work of God. The reality is God will never stop working until each and every human being is allowed to be vibrantly alive, creative, and given the means to flourish. Until everyone is free, clothed, and accepted for who they are. That means neither can we. Our work, the work of our church and of ourselves, our work as followers of Christ, is humanization.